Hello everybody, it's Sean Milburn once again. I'm here today in the garage with the Bay Area Drafting number 14 RSX. We already got the engine out of the car, which you saw in the previous video. Today we have the teardown of the motor. We already did kind of the nitty-gritty stuff that is kind of boring and tedious that you probably don't really want to see. So today we're here to show you what we're doing inside of the engine now that we have it apart and what we're going to be doing to it. So our first order of business today is going to be making sure that the new pistons we bought for the car are going to be fitting in nicely to the pre-existing connecting rods that we had in the car. We're going to be making sure that the bearings fit inside of these connecting rods without binding at all. If we get binding, then that's going to be bad for the engine. I've done a couple here already. So as you can see, the bearing slides right in with no issues. Whereas on one that I haven't done yet, I can't even get that to fit. So we're going to need to kind of mill those out a little bit, kind of size them up a bit, and make sure that these are going to be fitting in nice and smooth. So joining me once again today is going to be the crew chief for the Bay Area Drafting RSX, Tom Milburn.
Howdy folks. Yeah, like Sean was saying, this is the stuff that's really important and can be a little tedious because you got to do it right. And so to size these ends, I've got a little tool here. It doesn't take very much to take off a little bit of material. And one of the things you got to remember if you ever do something like this where you heat up the metal, that both these pieces of metal have to have the same temperature. Because if this is hot and this is cold, it'll feel like it fits nicely. But as they neutralize the temperature, what happens is that you lose your tolerance and it's locked on there solid. So usually what we do is we'll size these things and then we wait several hours and make sure the fit is good. And then we can put the wrist pin and our piston together and then move on to our block and do some work on the block.
While my dad and I are over there at the workbench making sure that all the pistons and rods are going to connect properly and have no binding issues, my brother Daniel's going to be over here working on the block. He's going to be honing it out to make sure that everything fits over here.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Yeah, so basically what I'm doing is I'm using this special honing tool that we have to take the surface layer of metal off the inside of the cylinder wall. Basically what that does is just makes it so when the piston rings and everything the new ones get put in, they seat properly and everything just works out well. So that's pretty much it.
An important part to note about this process is you really got to take it slow. You can't be doing this too fast because if you make this too big, we have to throw it away and start with a different one. So we're going to be taking it nice and slow. We're going to be making sure that the fit is just perfect enough to not bind, and then we're going to leave it there. Something else you got to watch for is to make sure that these don't get too hot. You don't want the metal to start overheating. Could start warping things. Something to take note of. All right, so now we got this fitting in here nice and smoothly. Doesn't wiggle. And it moves through there with very little to no resistance. Just what we're looking for. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of them, and then I'll let you guys know when we're going to start on the next part in the process. Another thing to note when doing this, once everything appears to be perfectly fine, fitting exactly as it should be, give it about another 2 hours to cool down, because once the metal starts to cool down, it's going to contract again, and it could be sized a little bit too small. So always going to want to make sure that everything fits as it should when all of the metal is cooled down. All right, so it's a couple hours later now. We got the pistons assembled onto the connecting rods, as you can see here. Each one of them is done now. So the process for assembling these is complete. We had Danny over there doing the honing. So we're gonna see how that's going on now. Should be all done and ready for install. How's it going over here, guys?
Good. We're just doing one without demonstration, so we wouldn't be under any pressure and screw it up the first time on camera.
We do it the first time every time anyway, huh?
But
Sure.
it looked like it went in real smooth. Looks like we got everything dialed in. We did the ring gapping, and that's very important. You put the ring in the cylinder, right? And you push the piston down on it so it's flat. And then each end of the ring will have a gap. And the manufacturer has a designed gap. And we measured all those. They're right on the money. We got everything, the piston put together.
We didn't even have to really gap them, did we?
No, we didn't have to gap them. We didn't have to gap these rings because the cylinders we didn't bore the cylinders out. We just honed them. And with honing them, it enlarged them just a little bit. So the ring didn't need to be gapped because the hole's a little large. But for backyard racing, you know, rebuild, that's good enough.
Yeah, so once we get all of this kind of stuff done, we start putting all of the pistons in. Once the assembly's kind of mostly done, I'll tune back in with you guys and you guys can see what that looks like. Yeah, I'm just gonna get a shot of the block here. You guys can see all 4 holes, because it's a 4-cylinder engine going back in the car. Super simple and easy.
Where's my crisp?
Always looking for tools, as always.
Yep.
Where's my head?
The most time-consuming part of any project is, where is my socket?
There's my wrench. Now that looks nice and clean. That's fitting in there nice and
Yeah,
smooth.
nice top dead center. Looks perfect.
Very nice.
Super smooth.
See, most of what we're doing to this motor, a real machine shop, their hair would be standing on end. Okay, so this is a junkyard motor that we're racing with. That we're trying to do this on a budget. I've done this lots of times, so I know what I can get away with.
This is only our 4th motor for the season, right?
Yeah, but the motors we had problems with had nothing to do with the rebuild. We had an oil pump failure, things like that. So what we're doing here is to show you that this can be done at home. We can cut some corners, but if you do it correctly, even cutting corners, you know, not having the perfect tools and all that kind of thing, with a little know-how and following some instructions, you can I've never had a failure because we didn't build it right. We've had component failures, but we haven't had a failure because we didn't build it right. That hasn't happened. So, you know, people out there are going to go, oh my God, look at that garage and the conditions that they're doing it in. Usually the garage is really clean. We just got a lot of other issues with stuff in my garage. But that doesn't mean we can't do a good job putting this thing together. So
Bunch of hacks.
yeah. So we're going to set this piston in this number 2 hole. This is number 2 piston. We made sure the rod was dialed in the right direction, the piston's in the right direction. So on this motor, the intake cutouts on the piston are the large ones, and the intake is on this side. So that's the way it's clocked. We put a little assembly lube on our bearing because it's going to go in, set in there. We do the same thing with our piston. Put a little assembly lube here, a little there, a little there. I'm pretty generous with this stuff. You wipe it around the piston, because when this motor starts up, it's going to be starting up with no oil in it. All right, we'll prime it the best we can, but this thing will be spinning around and firing up before the real oil pressure gets to it. So you want to put all this pre-assembly lube in place. So I'm going to slide the piston in. I do this way to square up this tool we're using. this compression tool, because I want to make sure it's nice and straight. So when I compress the rings with this tool, which is not my favorite tool, but this works good. They make much better ones, but this is what we got. And that makes sure that this band that I'm putting to compress the rings is square. Then I pull it back out and I make a little of adjustment. I slide it down a little bit. I slide it back in the hole. Now, what I do is I give it a little tap with my hammer just to make sure that this compression thing is squared up. Make sure one more time this thing is compressed the rings properly, because you can break them if they don't slide in there like they should. Usually it just takes a couple of taps. Oop, sorry, Dana.
No problem.
Make sure this is where it needs to be. That those rings are compressed completely. Sorry, folks. And now it should just glide right on in. I might have the band a little too tight. No, it's not going in. You don't want to force it. If it's not going in, we can always reset it. No, I'm going to take it out. Yep, it slipped by the... And this happens. That's why this particular tool is not my favorite. It can not get the ring compressed in here like you'd like it to be. Perfect example of what could be what could happen, and you want to be patient. First one slid in just perfectly. Just a little punch, went right in. See if we can get it to do it this time. Right in.
Yeah, there we go.
Excuse me.
I forgot to lube the cylinder. That's why it's not sliding in nice and smooth. I should have lubed the inside of this cylinder so it slid right in. My mistake. Camera happy. Nice and snug. So now's our, now we can see our rod is down on our crank. Excuse me. Piston's in place. Now we can put our end cap on. The bearing has slipped out of position here. And that does happen sometimes, especially if you have to hit it with the hammer like I did, push it in. It should just slide right in, but that's bad on me. For not lubing that cylinder so it slide right in. Give that a little scoot.
Back into position there.
Yeah. Get our end cap. Put some generous lube on there. Our lettering should read from the the lettering on this thing should be facing, so you could read it from the back of the engine. Now I'm just using this to, no pressure. This is just sliding on nice and easy. Make sure they go on the same. And draw them into place. There we go. Piston number 2 is in. On our way.
Yep, we're just going to repeat the same process for the other two, and that should be the pistons and rods back in the block. After that, we just need to throw the head back on it and button up the engine.
We'll see you then.
Yep, we'll see you once we get all that done.
Multiple malfunction.
So now all of the rod bolts are tightened against the crank. So that part's all done. We're putting the oil pump on currently, so we're just looking up all the torque specs for these parts of the engine. So you always want to make sure that you're using the proper specifications for tightening these bolts. Because if you don't, you could have malfunctions of any kind, really. Tighten it too much, you could be interfering. You could strip it. Yep, stripping's always something to watch out for as well. You don't want to be messing with that. Having to fix that, it's not fun.
Oh yeah, you strip aluminum, then you're talking helicoil in the hull. Pretty bad stuff. Taking these to 16 pounds a little bit at a time. There we go.
Yeah, and while he's doing this, I'm going to show you guys the head that's sitting over here. So we actually built this before we took the engine out of the car. It's pretty standard. You can see all of the valves and springs along there. Brand new setup.
Yeah, those are aftermarket Super Tech. Those are Super Tech valves and springs, which give us extra strength. Because what we do to this car, after a while, the stock valves are very good, but they'll give up. So we've had that trouble, so we're going the extra mile. Plus we ported this head, which means that we made the passageways for the intake and the exhaust a little more roomy to allow more air in and out of.
Yeah, you can see it in there.
Okay,
See how it's all shaved around the sides.
Okay, the oil pump is now on. We've got it torqued down specs. This oil pump is not the stock one. On K24s, you have this big suitcase looking thing that goes in here, and it's got 2 balancers in there to keep the vibration down in the motor. We kept it once, and it failed. It failed pretty good. It ruined the motor. It didn't take much time at all for it to fail. And we learned the hard way. Everyone told us to take that original one out. We didn't. We paid for it. So now we're putting a Type S, a K20 Type S. It needed some customizing to be put in here, but it's pretty minor. Just grind it a little bit so the clearance is over the bolts to fit it in. But this pump will be good for up to 10,000 RPM, which we don't go that high.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be cool if we could, but we're trying to not have this thing blow up and have to do this again. So probably about 8 is where we'll keep it.
Yeah, we're looking at for 8.
Yeah, 8 like max.
Yeah.
All right, so once we button all this up, I'll inform you guys on what we're doing next. We're likely going to be just putting all the covers back on and then sticking the head on. So before we put the head back on the car, we're going to have to reassemble everything that goes inside of the oil pan. Right now, we're looking at the bottom half of the block. This is going to be our windage tray. As you can see here, this is going to stop the oil from sloshing upwards into the crankcase, but allow the oil to drain out of the crankcase back into the pan as it needs to. This baffle is something we added into this part of the engine because when you're going through a corner and you're pulling lots of G-forces, the oil tends to slosh one way or the other. This stops it from doing that as much, because if the pump can't pick up any oil from the engine as it's sloshing around and the engine gets no oil, then ultimately that's going to destroy the engine, which we want this thing to last as long as possible. So oil is one of the most important parts of maintaining your engine and making sure everything's going to run fine. If you don't have oil, you don't have an engine. So after we're done assembling all of this, I'll let you guys know what we're doing next. All right, pan's all seated up. Went on pretty smoothly. Didn't have to do a whole lot of jostling with it. Got a nice amount of gasket maker along there, because if you have a leak on your oil pan, you're not gonna have a fun time. That's for sure. So again, always torque to spec. We're gonna get these bolts in, and then we're gonna torque them down and move on. We got the engine flipped back over on the stand here, so now we're looking down into the cylinders at the pistons. You can see 1 and 4 down, 2 and 3 are up. Right now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and grab the head over here. We're gonna go ahead and set it down on that gasket. We already got it set up here.
There's 2 little dowels that help us align this thing. So if we find those little dowels, it should just go plunk and go right into place, which it did.
Yep. Yeah, it's the beauty of being able to do things beforehand, like pull off a head and have it built by the time that you're ready to pull the block out. So that way we didn't even need to do this part.
Yeah, there's many hours of work on this head that you know, the porting and pre-assembly, it's just tedious. So there's nothing fun to watch about it, but this is a huge part of the performance.
So while all of these steps are important, one of the most important is making sure that your head studs are going in properly. One of the important things you need to do, we come over here, I already have a little cup of oil set up. What we're going to be doing is getting a little bit of this oil and putting it along these head studs before we slide it down in these holes. We don't want any kind of false binding going on when we're actually trying to thread these in, because of how hard that we have to torque down these screws here. This is a very big step. If we get this wrong and we either don't torque them properly, or it's not seated correctly, or we get a cross thread, we're gonna have a bad time. So this is a very important step to get right, and I'll show you guys how that's done right now. So we're gonna start with the first one. This, I'm just gonna take my finger here, slide some oil along this stud. Alright, that seems to be enough there. And for now, we're just gonna slide it down into the hole. Maybe start the thread. Seems to be okay there. We're gonna want to make sure that the head is going down evenly when we start screwing this on. So I'll show you guys how to do that next after we're done with this. I'm just gonna keep oiling these studs, and once I'm done with this, we'll move on to tightening it down. If you're ever unsure on what the torque specs are for any component on your car, Google is your best friend. Google has pretty much everything you're gonna need to find in order to just figure out what it is you need to be doing. You can find how to do anything on Google. As such, we needed to figure out the torque pattern on this head. So what we found is it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you're basically working from the middle out to the sides in an X pattern to make sure that the head is being pressed on evenly. If we were to start here and move here, we would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on. That would mean that this side is getting torqued all the way down before this side is even started. And you don't want that to happen. That could cause uneven pressure on the head gasket. It could cause the head to not sit properly. And those are all things you don't want to happen. Engine building is very specific. It's something that you really don't want to be messing too much with in terms of getting creative on the way that you put it back together. You kind of want to do it the way that the company did it, because that always tends to be the best way to do it.
They know best.
Yep, companies know best that originally designed these engines. So let's see, we're gonna do...
What I'm gonna do is snug them first, right? though. I don't want them loose. I don't want them tight. So we're going to snug it in the pattern. There it is. All right, now we got to get a breaker bar.
Yep, so now that all of these are done to 29 pounds, we're going to go ahead and grab a breaker bar because we're not quite done yet. 29 pounds is not going to be nearly enough to hold this on. So we're actually going to need to do 2 90-degree rotations on these bolts. So now that they're in to 29 pounds, we're going to give them a 90-degree rotation and then another 90-degree rotation on each bolt, and that should mean that we're all set up here. Ready? All right, so I've gone hands-free here with the camera so that I can hold this while he's turning this. It's going to require a lot of force, so we're going to need all hands on deck here. Yep, let's go. So that's 1 90-degree turn. It's another one. First 2 done. 9 and 10.
All right, we did it.
Yep, so that should be all on, nice and even. Let's get go. So now we've put these little keeper springs in on the head after we got it all bolted down. You can see them right here. These are going to make sure that these rockers here don't go rattling around everywhere. It's going to keep a little bit of tension on them and make sure that they're going to be nice and stable. So let's go ahead and put it on.
Okay, you're going to notice we have some zip ties holding this together. And it's because each one of these rocker sets has springs in posts in here that move back and forth through the VTEC. And if we don't have them strapped up like this, the springs and the dowels fall out.
Yeah.
So what we do is we get this thing fairly close into place here. And the only way we can get it in there for sure is this first set we have to take these off because there's not enough clearance for me to get the rack in with the zip tie in place, but the rest of them should be able to stay. Now you can see we're not on the rocker correctly, so we need to move our whole rack into the correct location. Sometimes it takes a little finagling, but we'll get it there.
I'm going to go hands-free again, and then you guys can watch us put this back in.
Now, which is nice is Honda, in their wisdom, has numbered all these journals. And Honda makes their motors, the tolerances right on the money. So I could take this rack and put it on another head and it'll fit perfectly. Which is awesome. Awesome stuff from Honda. Okay, so we got it in place. All their valves are nice and clear and loose. All the pieces are in there. Right? All good. So the next thing would be to put the cams in, but I need to change the drive gears for the cam because we're putting in a new cam. So that should take us a minute or so. So when we are ready to do that part, we'll clue you in.
All right, update. So we had to get the, we got some new cams here. We replaced the stock ones. So we got those in and fitted. We got all these tightened down. It was just some more tightening, so I didn't really want to display that. It's kind of just tedious, boring stuff. Right now we're working on the timing chain, making sure that everything is in order here. Again, one of the most important parts of building an engine, because if you are not on time, then your engine is not going to function properly at all. Could even break. In a very catastrophic way. So, yep, this goes back to everything in an engine needs to be done exactly right, or else it's going to be no good. Got to be very careful. All right, pouring a little bit of oil on the cams here, getting everything pre-lubed a little bit. We got the timing chain on. It's nice and tight, perfectly at top dead center. So we should be all good to go here. So we're gonna go ahead and put the cover back on. I'll set you guys up so you can watch. So we got the timing chain cover on now. It's looking all secured. Put a generous amount of gasket maker on it to make sure everything's gonna seal. And this is good to go. So now I just need to put the VTEC solenoid on this head from the old head. And we're getting really close.
Yeah, a couple hours, it'll be ready to put back in the car. Put the flywheel on, strain it back on.
Yep, got it all sitting here, so very close. Should be maybe done even tomorrow. All right, so we went ahead and we buttoned up the rest of the engine and got it prepped to put back in the car. You can see we stuck the straps back on it. We're gonna hoist it up using these. Valve cover went back in. The head's on good. All we're waiting for now is getting the water pump in. We ordered a new water pump. Hasn't come in yet. So that's pretty much the only thing that we need that's left. Once we do that, it's gonna be put in the car. We're gonna get it all sorted out, and then we're gonna do the first startup. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a little bit kind of long, and we really just wanted to show you kind of what it takes to kind of get one of these engines up and going. Really isn't too hard. Once you kind of do it a couple times, it's pretty straightforward. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. I have something really special coming up for you guys. So I hope you enjoy that. I'll see you guys soon. Have a good day.